through the wines, and then we'll turn it over to Rachel to talk about beans.
Absolutely. Here. Oh, thank you. Oh. Hey.
I knew this was going to be bad. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. You have such a speaker voice.
Yeah, so Rachel, I'm going to read for you. Just so everyone knows that I didn't know this existed in my life. And Robin, I would like this for Christmas. Maybe my birthday on Thanksgiving. I love a microphone. I feel like I should have one everywhere I go. So this is going to be a really great time for us. I am so happy to be here with all of you, new faces I love. A couple before I started, I want to thank Rachel for being here. I'll get into Rachel and I's story in a little bit, but it gets a little emotional, so I'll cry. And I'd also like to thank Lisa of Raleigh Media. Woo-hoo. She is carrying us and just helping us so much. Then Dream and Draft, Kevin, we love you. Thank you so much. Always supportive of Bloom Here. And Bloom Here, so who we are is a space and place of empowerment for women. And what we do is we help women come back to society with dignity that may have been abused, addicted, trafficked, all of the things that unfortunately happen to women in life. And what we want to do is help them heal with dignity. And the biggest thing about Bloom Here and who we are is that we provide women housing, rent, dental, and mental free for 2 years. Yay! Like, that's huge. And we do that holistically, and we do that in a way of love and compassion, and in a way that makes a woman feel like a woman. And it is my honor to do what we do every day. I actually am very excited to tell you tonight we have 2 of our staff members that have been beside me in this journey. And to my left is Robin. Donata, please mark that straight. And she is just a light for us. And then I have Emily, who is our program director. Woo, love. Oh, social worker, sorry. Program directors on a very nice honeymoon. Love you, Sarah. We really do know where you are. You're vacationing for your anniversary. So that's a little bit about Bloom Here and what we do. Any questions?
Let's turn it over to Katie and introduce us to tonight's wine selection.
Now, do I have to give this microphone back? Okay.
Easiest to it.
Hold on. And oh, I'm sorry.
Everywhere I go. Okay, so let me just put this on real quick. So who likes wine? Okay. As you probably know, my name's Kevin, and I own the bar downstairs, Dram and Draft, which actually specializes in not wine, but whiskey. But years ago, I owned a wine shop, and it was my first love, really, in that whole world of alcohol, which is I've made a life in. And before we talk about each specific wine, we're going left to right. Usually in a wine tasting, you'll go lightest to heaviest, or darkest, or most bold. So we'll start with the one on the left. It's Pinot Noir. And before we talk about the wines, talk about how to taste wine. And this is, I really enjoy wine. I think you should drink it any way you want it, with whatever you want. If you want to put an ice cube in a red wine, I don't care. So this is the only pretentious thing I'll say tonight. But the way you actually look at wine, it's a lot like whiskey, just a little bit different technique, you know, and a lot of you probably know some of this or all of it, but, you know, first you look at the color. A lot of times it's nice to have a white piece of paper behind it to really look at the color, look how dark it is, tell certain things about it, maybe how long it's been aged, or maybe what grape varietal it is, possibly. And then, of course, you want to smell it. So it's all your senses, right? So we get a visual, we get a phone call. Same time, always. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, they are.
So we get in there and smell it, and keep in mind, you know, it's volatile, it's got alcohol in it, so it's evaporating rapidly, so you don't want to jump right in there, but it's not like whiskey, so you can get in there pretty close. Think about, you know, the smells that you're picking up on. I get all kinds of things from this Pinot Noir, and it makes me think of like sweet stuff like candied cherries or something like that, or maybe some sort of like cherry pie filling or something like that. But it's all just a pre-association. You know, whatever you smell is there. That's what your brain is picking up. So that's fine. And then the fun part is, of course, you take a sip, and a lot of times that first sip is just a washing of the palate, a cleaning of the palate. A lot of times, you know, when you're tasting wine for hours, and that happens sometimes when life is good, but you spit, you know, you spit after each sip. And you're missing the finish on that, but after you do it for a while, you kind of anticipate the finish, and you're just trying to not get drunk, basically. Your body's still going to absorb some alcohol. You're still eventually going to start getting drunk, but your palate actually gets sharper as you drink more, and your brain gets duller as you drink more. So you hit like a sweet spot where your brain's still not dull, your palate's real sharp, and you're picking up, you know, all your taste buds are fine-tuned. So when you taste it though, that first taste, do whatever you want. Sometimes people just like swish it around almost like mouthwash and then spit it out or swallow or whatever. So we'll do that. Just a little sip. Just get your palate ready. I don't know if you drank a cup of coffee on the way here or had a tuna sandwich for lunch, but all that is going to conflict with what you're tasting. So here's the real pretentious part, and you've probably seen people do it, but you take a sip, let it wash over your mouth a little bit, hold it in your mouth, and try to inhale through the wine. First time you do this, you might feel like you're being waterboarded, but you're not. So be careful. Just take a small sip and try to do that. And what you're doing is you're bringing air through that volatile liquid. So it's evaporating in your mouth, going into your esophagus. And as you do that, you'll swallow it, and then you'll exhale. And all those vapors will come up through your esophagus, through your nose, and you'll pick up a lot more flavors. So I'll show you how, I want to curse, but I'll show you how effing pretentious it looks, okay? That wasn't the greatest example. It's been a long time since I did it, but when I owned a wine shop, we did it so much that I do it like with a lukewarm cup of coffee, with my water. I'd be like, what the hell am I doing? You know, but you're just so used to doing it because you're tasting wine every day. But do that, practice it, and you really just take a small amount, and you'll get more comfortable with it. Or don't do it. You know, do whatever you like. That's what I'm saying. But there is a proper way to taste. And then once after you do that, you do whatever you want. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. Take that. Here's to Rachel.
So is Oprah coming? Is that what I?
She is.
Okay.
Yeah. She's zooming in.
Okay. Everyone's virtual these days. She's virtually here. She's virtually here. So if you want to, there's water in front of you too. If you want to take a sip of water in between each one, if you want to try each one and notice the differences, then I'm going to grab my other two glasses, and I'm not going to chug those, but I'm going to grab the bottles as well. And then we'll talk about each individual wine just a little bit. We're not going to nerd out too much. We can always talk about it more later if you'd like, if anybody wants to. But we did 3 red wines here, and this is, the first one's a Pinot Noir. Sip the other ones, then we'll talk about the other ones, okay? How about we do that? Tell them all the wine's gone.
You want to give your card? And I'll
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's for the elevator.
Okay.
And that's for the door down there and up here.
Get 5 all the same.
Yeah, okay.
He's coming on time.
Okay, so that first one was the Crosno Pinot Noir. This is actually Slovenian Pinot Noir. And, you know, Slovenia is one of those countries where you're like, it's over there somewhere, right? So it's just to the north of Croatia, which is actually a lot of Croatian wines that are out on the market now that are to varying degrees of enjoyment, in my opinion. There's a lot of Hungarian wines out that have been out for a while now, but there are some interesting ones there. Slovenia, though, these grapes actually are grown to the west of Slovenia is Italy. I didn't know that until somebody told me, and I checked it on a map. I was like, yeah, there's Slovenia and there's Italy. It's crazy. But they're borders. So this is actually grown basically on the border. So it's partially in Slovenia and partially in Italy. And then the grapes are all taken and they're crushed and bottled in Slovenia. So there's actually a lot of Italian Pinot Noirs out there too. And this is more of a mild old world style Pinot Noir. A lot of Pinot Noirs in Europe can get really like barnyardy and really like heavy, really like earthy. In the States, it's usually a little bit more of that Bing cherry flavor. And this one is probably, even though I get cherries in it for sure, it's a little more European style, but it's not overdone. So, and Pinot Noir is one of those versatile wines that you can, one like that, I think that's a little bit on the lighter side. You could have with a heavy fish dish or a light meat dish, right? We always want to pair wine with food because wine is not an alcoholic beverage. It's a grocery. It's a grocery item. You should have it on every meal. Okay, so the next one is the Don Janeiro.
What is it?
Don Janeiro. I'm working on my accent. I lived in Buenos Aires for a long time, and they don't speak Spanish down there. I don't know what it is down there. It is Spanish, but it's Argentinian Spanish. It's very particular Spanish.
Oh. It's a mascot. Over here, Daddy. Daddy.
Well, the star of the show's here. You can't compete with that.
Yeah, that's hell.
So, what's your dog's name?
Jackson.
How old is he?
He just turned 9-ish.
Okay, he's Black Lab.
Yep. Laughing at Daddy. Daddy. David. Your wine's over here. I mean, you're already late. I can't believe y'all. I know y'all are
There's 3, in fact. There's more than that, but only 3 are for you.
It was a PBS, right?
Why don't you come sit up here? Hello, Zoom.
Left to right, left to right.
Left to right. There.
Hello, David.
This is.
Are you prepared? Are you good?
I'm good.
All right. Princess is here. You need to catch up.
You do. That first one is a Pinot Noir. We're on the second one, but you're not far behind. We just started talking about the second one. So Malbec from Mendoza, Argentina, which I lived in Buenos Aires for 7 months and then went back down last August, 2019. Do you guys remember that year, 2019? We used to go places and do things and see people. Yeah, it was crazy. So I went down there for about 10 days. I spent a little bit of time in Buenos Aires, and then I flew to Mendoza, which is a couple hour flight west of Buenos Aires. But Argentinians are real big on focusing on one thing. You know, their cuisine is their beef. They have amazing beef in Argentina. Their red wine is Malbec. Their white wine is Torrontés. You know, it's their drink of choice is Fernet. Their beer of choice is Quilmes. They usually focus on one thing. And when I was there, actually, it was interesting to see they're starting to branch out a little bit more. But Malbec and Argentina are synonymous with each other, and usually a pretty big wine, right? Do we agree? Have we all tasted this? Anybody doing the sippy thing? I don't see it. I don't see anybody dribbling on their shirts.
It's red carpet, white marble, black. Too much stress for me.
So you don't understand what mold is
That's true, actually. If you save some of the last one, that's why it's nice to go through, have a little sip, have a sip of water, decide which one you like best, and then just spend all your time on that if you like. But what you tasted previous is going to affect how you taste this. That's why we go lightest to boldest, almost always, white to red, and the only exception to that really is if you have a white wine with a lot of residual sugar in it, that'll blow your palate out, and you almost want to do that last. I don't know. It's a tough call. So pretty big Malbec, and I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking, Kevin Barrett, are you crazy? This is the second one. How are we going to top this, and what are we going to finish with? That is what you were thinking. I could see it in your eyes. So Malbec, pretty big. Now the last one is an Italian wine that is incredibly interesting to me. And I'll tell you a little story before we get into this one. Man, it's got such an interesting nose to it. It's almost like a cola nose. So when I first got into wine, I don't know. Yeah, it was so long ago now. I forget how old I was. I think it was early 20s, probably just like 21, 22. Early 20s. I was working in a little Italian restaurant owned by a Swedish guy that had a degree in food chemistry. It was a little old house, used to be a French bistro. This place had a lot of history. The chef was incredibly talented. Therefore, he had drug and alcohol problems. But he was amazing. He was literally amazing. That guy could run that kitchen by himself with no support staff with a full restaurant. Like he was so good despite himself. It was almost hampered him. He was so good. But so it was an Italian place, and I was at that age where I thought a $10 bottle of wine or a $100 bottle of wine, they're all the same thing. Just some rich and or famous person said they like this bottle, so they charge more for it. I'm here to tell you it's not necessarily true. Sometimes it's true. What's that?
They tell me. Robin was talking to me, so I missed it. I can listen.
I know, because I blew her wine with her.
I believe that.
Okay. Well,
I was in trouble.
Yeah.
they've been trouble the whole time. You just became trouble. So anyway, I was at this restaurant. I thought wine is wine. I didn't really see any difference in it. And then one night, the owner came in. He's getting a divorce with this street. He's a bad situation. He came in with his girlfriend that was 20 years younger than him. They sat down, shared a meal, and had a bottle of Barbaresco, which is a celebrated Italian wine. One of my favorites. There's a mountain on the eastern side they grow Barbaresco. On the western side they grow Barolo, and it's all the same grape. It's all basically the same wine, but it's fantastic. We had it, and it was me and one other guy. It wasn't a huge place there, but me and one other guy that pretty much ran the floor. We were both servers, and he was a little bit older than me, a lot smarter than me. And he's like, well, they left, and there's this much left. Let's share it. Here's a glass for you, a glass for me. And I was like, let's do it. And I took a sip of it, and I'm telling you, it was that moment. That wine took a grab of my taste buds, pulled on them, let go. They bounced back, and I was like, wow. That's why you can charge $100 for a bottle of wine. That's amazing. Okay, so I am a big fan of Italian wines, and this is a really interesting Italian wine because it's Primitivo and Syrah. Primitivo is what we call Zinfandel. So there was always speculation that they were the same grape. In the last maybe 10 years, they proved that they are actually the same grape or originated from the same place. So really big wine. Not necessarily typical Italian style, but delicious and amazing in itself. The Syrah or Shiraz, in Australia we call it Shiraz, is another big grape. So those two mixed together, this gives us just a flavor bomb. It's a little jammy, like full bodied, and like I said, with the nose, I get so much off of it. It's like, man, really,
That's incredible.
maybe some fig or something like that. There's like a little bit jamming it. I'm thinking almost like a cola smell, but you guys tell me. Do you get figs and cola? The third one is the
I am
best.
not a red wine.
Is that what you said?
This is my favorite.
Okay.
And then I've had some people ask if you're selling the bottles of wine tonight.
Everything's for sale for the right price.
And then they asked if you were giving a % back from here. That was
They did that.
Did they ask you if I was matching my?
No, we're not.
my It's been a long 7 months.
Today would be the day
So, oh, absolutely, yes. If you like, and if as we proceed, if anybody would like a glass of any of these, we'll figure that all out too. We have more. We have more downstairs. If anybody wants to go home with a bottle, we're offering it at a not restaurant markup, a reasonable retail markup. So, if you don't know, at a restaurant, you're paying, probably 2 or 3 times what they wholesale it for. At a wine shop, you're paying maybe 50% markup. So it is significant in restaurants. That's how we make our money. There's a lot of waste there. But maybe I shouldn't have told you that. Well, it's not that big of a secret.
A lot
I
of
don't
your
think.
wines, like we were having this discussion, do you take a lot of your wines to restaurants and have them pour them for you?
No.
You don't, you always, you're at a restaurant.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would if it was a really special bottle and they didn't have anything close to it. But most of the time, if I'm going out, I'm drinking wine. It's a place that has something that is close to what I have. But every once in a while, like, I mean, a really special bottle. Like 10 years ago, there was a bottle of Krug 95, and that was a special bottle that almost no restaurant would have. And still, they're charging you $20 or $30 or $40, which is also just, that's ridiculous too. Yeah, but yeah, exactly. But what you're paying is because you're not choosing off their menu. That's what they're charging for, which is just fine to do if it's a special bottle. There's some people that bring in their $15 bottle from the grocery store, and that, I mean, you're welcome to do that. And good restaurant is going to just be fine with it. But I wouldn't do that just because I know people. I have a reputation. No, I think it's fine, but I don't do it. I actually really enjoy going out and finding the gem on the wine list. And sometimes it's funny that the less expensive wines are the ones that are marked up 3 times. The more expensive wines are marked up 1 time, maybe less than that if they start to get really expensive because, it just gets unreasonable after a certain point. So if you find the gem on the wine list, price-wise or vintage-wise or just scarcity-wise, that's always fun. And it's enjoyable, and you don't know what you're getting before you get there, so it's kind of fun. If it's you and another person out to dinner and you have a bottle of wine, you have a third person at the table because that wine is going to have such a big part of that meal. It's going to affect what you order, how you eat it. It's going to change over time, and it's I love it. I love a bottle of wine with dinner, and other person optional.
And that is your bike. They have to get their own.
Sometimes. So that's all I've got about these wines. We can talk more about it later, but I didn't want to take up too much time on this. Just wanted to give you 3 good red wines. Sorry about that. But I hope you enjoyed it. This is, yes, right here. Oh, I do. That's right. Okay. I was trying to make my escape. Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure, ladies. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin. So real quick, I'm going to get to what we're really supposed to be doing here tonight is talking to Rachel. I have her bio, I want you all to know, but I have a special story, and I feel very connected to Rachel just for the fact that I work with Rachel's mom every day. And this is before I knew anything about Rachel. I met Jean, I want to say about a year ago, and Jean is Rachel's mother. Jean is the CEO of BLOOMHERE. And what that means is she's the controlling officer of all things that we do. And it's the truth. And so she was one of the most spectacular women I've ever met. And she was outgoing and what do you need? And she was on a little bit of a learning curve because she had retired, God love her, and didn't think she was going to work again. now we got her for Bloom Here, and she has just been the light that has, for days that are bad for me, she has been a light to me. And I had no clue about you. I had no clue about any family. She kept y'all in the dark. But as we got closer, I heard about you, and then the book came, Beads with Rachael, and she's like, Lynn, I want to give you this book. And I haven't read a book, I think, since 2017, a whole book. And I took the book up to the mountains one weekend, and I read this book, and I called Jean several times crying. And I was like, I've never read a book like this where I felt like you were sitting beside me. And literally I was like, oh my God, I know this woman. And I just, such respect, Rachael, for you, and for the fact that you could put this in a book and write it the way that you did and make me feel comfortable listening to your story. Because I think a lot of times when we do have stories that have impacted our life in a very traumatic way, it's very hard for it to come across and land on people where it will make a impact in their life. And this book has impacted me, this book. But, oh, yes, and you all get to go home.
I did.
So you get to choose. I do say hardback because they last longer.
Yeah.
Now,
This is the paperback.
but I do want to give her the introduction that she deserves, and this is my Oprah moment where she reads from cards. So I practiced this. Rachael Brooks is a writer and a public speaker in the sexual violence prevention and mental wellness sectors located in Raleigh, North Carolina. She has spoken in partnership with Rape Crisis Center, nonprofit organizations, and college campuses across North Carolina. Rachael is an author of Beads, an award-winning memoir detailing her journey from sexual assault victim to survivor. Yes, girl. Beads speaks to the challenges of sexual assault. Survivors face the range of emotion and the experience throughout the recovery process. Her story takes place immediately following the graduation from UNC Chapel Hill and describes the main injustices she experienced with the justice system, which are very paramount today. So I would like to all of you introduce Rachael, who I already feel like is my friend, and thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me, and for everyone who's joining during this crazy pandemic. I really appreciate it. And for those who have read the book, this will be, there's a train. For those who have read the book, this will be a little bit of a refresher, but I'm gonna do a few readings, just some of my somewhat favorite passages from the book, just to provide an overview to those who haven't read it. So if you feel free to follow along, but I'm gonna start with the preface, and I'll give the train a second. Okay, so starting with the preface, a little bit of backstory. So I was a public accountant for 9 years, had my CPA, and never in a million years would have ever thought that I would write a book. And I came into this idea after the Me Too movement hit in 2017, when several celebrities were coming forward and voicing their stories about Harvey Weinstein, and the slow trickle from there kind of put the bug in my ear that maybe I could do the same thing. So I kind of muddled around with that idea for a while, and eventually sat down one day, and the preface was not the first thing I wrote, but eventually sat down one day, and it just kind of went on from there. So I will start. So someone wise once said to write what you know. I was raped when I was 22, and my journey over the past 12 years is what I know. So I decided to write about it. I had this horrible thing happen to me, but there's beauty in how it shaped me into the person I am today. In this day and age, it seems that people want to be heard more than ever, whether it's in the form of national rallies or letters to your local congressman. People are speaking out. It could be the media talking at us constantly, but I believe more voices are coming forward, more courage is being displayed, and more change is happening. The Me Too movement against sexual harassment and sexual assault was waged in 2017. And what a shock it was. Was this real? Was this actually happening? Women were coming forward after years and years of silence. It was shocking and powerful. This movement was at the forefront of basically every news source out there, but also how sick, how sad, and how frustrating. These women never reported what happened to them, or if they did, nothing was done about it. Recent statistics show that in the United States alone, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men are survivors of sexual violence. It's quite disturbing, and it all hit way too close to home, reminding me of a familiar story, sadly, the one of me 9 years prior. So I'll speak candidly a little bit about my attack. I won't go into the details that are in the book, but I had just graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, as Melinda had said, and I had moved up to Washington, D.C. to start an internship with a public accounting firm up there. And I was out for a night with some girlfriends and was fixing to get a cab back to the apartment that my boyfriend and I shared. And coming from this bubble town of UNC Chapel Hill, I had never really taken cabs in my life. And so I guess you could say I was a bit naive to just that big city life and how they worked. And so when I got into this man's cab, there was no meter, and he was on the phone with who I thought was another customer. And unfortunately, it was not another customer, and he was just pretending to be a cab driver. And I had unfortunately gotten into the front seat of the car, not knowing where I was and having been drinking that evening. Still no red flags until he pulled the car over on the side of a highway and shut the car off, and things escalated very quickly with a weapon, and he proceeded to rape me on the side of this highway. And I really thought that that was it for me at 22 years old. Saw my face in the headlines on CNN and started thinking about all the things that I had done in my life. Had I done enough? Was this really going to be it? Like, how did I even get myself in that situation? And so you hear the term fight or flight, and unfortunately, I didn't have much of the option of either, because he was holding a knife to my neck, so I couldn't exactly fight. And then the fact that I was in a car, if I were to have gotten out, where would I have gone? And so I basically went into survival mode, and I went into really complying with whatever he said to make sure that I could give myself a fighting chance to get out alive. Fortunately, he, had a one-track mind and got back on his side of the car and dropped me off about a block from my apartment, so that he did not know where I lived. And from there, everything was kind of just a long downward spiral. I had a horrible experience with the DC sexual assault unit. I had a incredibly crazy experience with the hospital and getting a rape kit. And going through this journey was something that I never thought that I would encounter in my life. I've always been kind of a straight and narrow person. I've always done the right thing. I've always made good choices, had a great childhood, and had my life like pictured out. And as you can imagine, that all came crashing down after that evening. So the next chapter I'm going to read from is one that is called, and I apologize, I don't have my my page markers in this. And I'm actually going to have to go look at my own table of contents. Okay, so the next chapter that I'm going to read from is called The Face, because I think that this is applicable to many different areas of life, not just folks who have gone through trauma. But it is, I just feel that it's very relevant, especially in today's world. So in my efforts to bury and suppress the darkness of prior weeks, I went through the motions of life. I told myself everything was good. I went to my internship every day. I grocery shopped, brought my clothes to the dry cleaners, attempted adult conversations, showered, and tried carrying on business as usual. But it wasn't usual. In fact, it was the most unusual I had ever been in my 22 years of life. I needed to do business as usual because if I didn't, I would shatter into a million pieces. I didn't realize how exhausting it was keeping up my type A personality post-rape. I was crumbling inside, but did not, always let myself acknowledge it. My attacker was out there and about in the world, living freely, and here I was hiding behind face. I was living in this shell of my former self, trying desperately to get back to that person, but she did not exist anymore. I felt lost. I longed for control, consistency, familiarity, and protection from the dangers of the world. The truth of the matter was I had none of those, or at least I didn't feel like I did. Regardless of how good Face was, and it was superb, it was completely external. Face became an ironclad barrier to my inside world. Suppression felt like the best coping mechanism at the time, and after all, I needed to focus on my relationship with the guy I loved deeply, but he was slipping away, and I knew it. So that, I think, was very representative of how I spent many years of my life following my attack, just putting on a happy face and dealing with it in various ways. So the next thing, before I read the last little bit from the reading, I wanted to talk about the title of Beads, because I get asked very frequently how I landed on this title. And it was not my first choice, or not my, I shouldn't say first choice, it was not my initial thought. The book had a different title for the majority of me writing it, honestly, until I started writing the chapter that's actually called Beads. And it's a really cool story, and I didn't realize how much it resonated with me until I started writing the chapter. And so right after my attack happened, my mom, who Melinda spoke about, she took me away to our mountain house that's right outside of Boone in North Carolina. And we were driving in the car, and she told me, if there's one thing that you can do, what would you want to do? And I thought about it for a millisecond, and I said, I want to go to Michael's, the craft store. I was always, I love crafts, I love scrapbooking, and I don't know, there's just something comforting, therapeutic to me. I love like papers and stickers, and my mom would always be like, where the hell did you get this from? It did not come from me. But I always have just taken, they're saying it's true. I've always just taken such joy in these like little crafts that I find to do at Michael's. So we stopped at a Michael's on the way to Boone, and I walked in, and it was just like I was seeing life for the first time, because I felt like I had this whole new perspective, and I didn't think that I was ever gonna be able to see anything ever again. And so when I walked in, it was just like the Mecca, and I perused all the aisles, and I took careful consideration into thinking what I wanted to pick out that was going to be my craft. And I landed on the bead aisle. And so my mom was following me aimlessly. I mean, gosh, I think we were there for over an hour, and she just starts loading stuff into the cart. I mean, necklace, chains, bead books, bead trays, bags of beads, I mean, everything. And I'm, still just kind of in a blurred state, but I'm just so excited. And we get up to the register, and $400 later, we walked out with the bead aisle. And I sat for 2 weeks at my mom's cabin in her loft, and made this hideous jewelry that I thought was beautiful. And my mom would cook for me and come up and just make sure I was doing okay. And I watched Lifetime movies and made this jewelry for 2 weeks straight. And so as I was writing this chapter, and after those 2 weeks, I put all of those beads into the ugly bead tray, into the ugly bead bag, and never looked at them ever again. I never looked at the jewelry again. It was just what I needed to do at that time. But I realized when I was writing the chapter that it really resonated with me how impactful that was, just that time where my mom was able to physically remove me from the city where all of this trauma happened and was able to allow me to have some sort of escape from that reality. And it was just what I needed at the time. So I decided to go with that as my title, along with this metaphor that, imagine that you're wearing this beaded necklace and it gets ripped from your neck, and the beads, they scatter everywhere. And, some you can find immediately and put back on your necklace. Some you're never going to find ever again. They're going to be lost. Some are broken, some are discolored. And slowly but surely, as we're moving through life and are able to restrand this necklace, it's not necessarily going to look the same, but it's still going to be on that same strand. And I think that that's also so representative of trauma and just healing, in the fact that, it doesn't have to define you, but it can be a part of who you are. And so I took that metaphor and also started to weave that throughout the book as well. So with that, I will actually read the last paragraph of the book. It's not giving any cliffhanger or anything away for those who haven't read it. No spoilers. But I end it in a similar way that I start it in the first chapter. But I say, life is a funny thing. One day you're about to die, and the next you're living this beautiful life. Somehow I managed to take something awful and turn it into something productive, something hopeful and something beautiful. I did that. And I call my attacker shithead in the book. Sometimes I don't use the profanity depending on the crowd, but this crowd is okay with it. So shithead may not have taken my life that night, but I am the one who decided to keep living. No one can ever take that strength from me, and if I can do it, anyone can. Trust me. So that is my overview of the book. Thank you.
I'm asking questions.
Perfect. Yeah.
Good?
Yeah. That's great. And I'll actually, I know.
I promise I'll try not.
I'll happily give it back. I tend to have a loud voice. So I
Can you hear us? Like, you think everybody's hearing us okay on the Zoom and everything? Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. So for me, reading the book, and there, when did you let go of the shame? Like, when were you okay with like saying?
That took a very long time. I had my close-knit circle of people that I told and felt comfortable knowing, but the majority of the people that I would come into contact with on my day-to-day life, people I worked with, people that I maybe went to school with or hadn't seen in a while or whatever. I mean, my face, as I called it in the book, was in full force. And I got so good at doing that because I was still so embarrassed, and still I never wanted anyone to know this big bad secret because it was so taboo. And people still to this day, I mean, even 12 years later, it's not something that people comfortably talk about. Not that it's a comfortable topic, and nor should people feel comfortable talking about it, but I think that whole stigma was really hard for me, that I was always this person that was on this straight and narrow path and always made the right decision and was always kind of the goodie. And then look what happened. Like, look what situation I put myself in. I beat myself up over that for a while. But I think when I started speaking with the nonprofit that I'm involved in here in Raleigh, I spoke to strangers. And so those people had no idea who I was. And I felt myself being extremely open and able to share my story and answer their questions. But I started out so long as it was nobody that I knew. And then I kind of graduated from there. I gained some confidence and was becoming more well received and started to feel a lot more comfortable talking about it. But I would say, I don't think I can give a definitive answer as to when the shame went away. Better said, more just me becoming more comfortable talking about it. Because there are still some, so I left public accounting to pursue writing this book, and I'll be at my neighborhood pool or whatever, and I'll meet like another mom who doesn't work, and she'll ask me, so what do you do? And I still have a hard time sometimes saying that I'm an author, because then I know the next question is going to be, oh, well, what did you write your book about? And sometimes I go there, sometimes I don't, and I just say, oh, I used to be a CPA. And I don't quite know why. I don't know if it's just me gauging the reception of it or what, but there is still some of that. I don't want to say it's shame, but just discomfort that I don't even want to like get into it. Right. So yeah, that's a tough question.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It was a long-winded answer.
And I think like with the shame part, and why I brought that up is for so many women that something bad happens to, there's a shame, right? And and just like, and it's hard to as well when something has happened and then you're writing this incredible book that every human being needs to read, truly. And that when people ask you what you do, and not being able to say, well, I was raped, and so I wrote a book about it. Sorry to make you feel uncomfortable.
Well, right. And I've always been that person in nature too.
Right.
I'm a people pleaser.
Right.
I don't want to push really anyone's envelope. I will speak my mind. But I also want people to be okay, I guess, with what I say. Not as much nowadays that I've written this book, and it is like as raw can be.
Yeah.
And you just kind of get over the point of, well, I don't really care what people think, because if that is going to change their perception of the type of person that I am, then I have no room for you in my life. So, but that's also a hard, concept, I guess, to grasp, and hard space to get to, not wanting everyone to like be okay with my choices and what I do and all of that. So yeah, and I think especially for women, I think everyone just wants women to be okay, like everything's fine. It's like okay, well, this happened, so move on.
Right,
Just everything you've got, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and everything just, I think in general, you just think that, everyone is fine, and we can just sweep it under the rug and get back to business, I guess. Right. But that's obviously not the case.
No,
so I definitely want to bring so much light to that.
Well, I also think in this book too, when I read it, there's so much wrong, and this kind of goes back to Bloom Here with our system and how we treat people that have been raped or that don't have any money to get help, or what does that look like? And one of the things, and as you guys go through the book, you'll see this, is that your rape kit did not get processed till how long?
It was 1.5 years after it was taken. And unfortunately, that's considered a short amount of time, especially in North Carolina. You have heard over the past year or so, our North Carolina Attorney General has made it a huge effort of his to get backlog rape kits tested. And there's been a couple of stories that have come out where, women or victims, I should say, women and men, victims from 30 plus years ago that are just now having their kits tested. And so I think about how agonizing it was during my 1.5 years versus someone that has been waiting for 30 years. So as sick as it is, 1.5 years is not considered to be bad. But in my mind, like, I talk a little bit about this in the book. Rapes aren't murder, right? So they're kind of put on the back burner. But what I think you can see if you look at trends and statistics is a lot of murderers start out as rapists.
Mm-hmm.
So if those rape kits could be tested in a timely manner, who knows if murders could have been prevented, or if more rape victims could have been prevented. In my case especially, there was a case in 2006 that had that kit been tested, I may have never met my fate that night. So things like that, I try not to get hung up on it, but it is a problem. It is a huge systemic problem that is, I think, becoming more and more talked about in the country now, for like big name folks like Mariska Hargitay and people coming to DC to talk on behalf of this issue and that sort of thing. But it's great, but I'm also like, well, where the hell has this been? These are kits that are just sitting on shelves of police stations and gathering dust. And I mean, it's just awful. It's really awful to think about my journey and my coping and everything that I went through. And I was able to identify this person, to not know and to not have that justice is, it's awful.
Yeah. Well, and I think also too, thinking about it as to how you were treated through the police system, and the not believing and all of that for me really stuck out too in the book. Cause I was like, well, wait a minute, how could that happen? And we now with the Me Too movement have come to this place where it is happening.
Oh yeah.
And for you, you were lucky. You had a fighter behind you, which was your mother. And I believe that, and this is one thing I would like to say if this goes out into the whole world, is that we at BLOOMHERE will fight for you. And so if you don't have anybody to fight for you, I've got a woman named Jean that she's going to fight for you. She can go another round, but I can go another round, and we have a whole team that will fight for you because I'm truly believe in your story. And it's like everybody deserves fair, right? And the way you were treated through the whole process. And if you didn't have that system behind you, that support system, and somebody that continued to push you to fight, correct?
Yes.
So,
and that was brutal. I mean, that was probably one of the most brutal parts of all of this was the treatment from the detectives. But like you said, I mean, my mom and I were one determined duo, and we just did not let it go. Because no matter how long it took, we were gonna figure out who this person was, because obviously he was a stranger, which is rare in a lot of rape cases, or so we know of from what's reported. So we were very determined, which I will be forever thankful for, because I think that I don't know that I would have been able to have that same fight if I didn't have my mom fighting with me. Because it's a whole lot easier to go through something with someone who is also on your side and believes you and wants to find the same truth that you do than it is to go about it alone. So
did you find closure in writing this book?
I did. I think my biggest goal in writing this was to bring all those folks, with regardless of what type of trauma they go through, bring them to the idea that you're not alone. I think, just like you said, with BLOOMHERE, we will fight for you. Almost, if a stranger is reading this and has no idea who I am, but has gone through a similar type of trauma, they can feel like I am their fighter, in whether I will ever know them or you know, or not. And so I wanted it to be very conversational in nature, so that you felt like that I was sitting right next to you telling my story. And I think that was just my main goal. If I can help someone in that regard to not feel alone, or to finally tell a friend, or not that I feel one way or the other about reporting. I think there are pros and cons to both. But if someone then decides to report, or whatever impact the book has on you, that was my goal, is if I could just help one person. And I think it's, I mean, I don't want to say cool, because not that this topic is cool, but I think it can pertain to any type of trauma, you know, going through a divorce, or loss of a child, or infertility, some of things that I've experienced in my life as well. And so, you know, it's not just a book for rape victims per se. It can be for really just the grieving process and healing and coping, and seeing how I did it, which by no means I don't recommend it to anybody. But if that is the path that you go down, just hearing that someone else went through the same thing, that's always been huge for me, is knowing that that I'm not alone, and that I didn't bring this on myself.
Right.
So, which is a lot of the guilt I had for a long time. So.
And then I know you have 2 sons.
I do.
I met one of them. I was so excited. I did. She's so cute.
Yeah, they're crazy.
How does this affect you as a parent?
Yeah, so.
And thank God you had sons. Let's be real.
Right.
I'm gonna break it down there. Let's be real.
Well, I think that also, you know, I've done a couple of pieces about parenting and being a rape survivor, and especially parenting boys. And I think as a parent, just coming at it of an angle of, you know, there are going to be situations in life that you're going to come across that you're not familiar with, and I think it comes down to how are you going to respond to something like that? Are you going to be the one that's going to walk away and turn a blind eye? Are you going to be the one that's doing that? Are you going to be the one that's going to be the fighter and stand up for what you know is right? And I think that for me, that is the most important thing to instill in my 2 boys, is not only that difference between right and wrong, but when you see wrong and you hear wrong, you stand up for it. You go that extra mile, and you speak out. And I think that mindset for me, because I persevered through every hurdle, you know, every possible hurdle you could possibly think of, and kept going. And I would hope that I will impart that same, you know, parenting technique, I guess, and instill that fight into my kids. And then second, just you know, overall, just being a good person. You know, there's so much going on in the world right now, and I think just really focusing on like getting back to those core values of like what it means to just be a decent person. There's a lot of hate in the world, and I just also hope that my boys, regardless of, you know, gender, race, sexual preference, whatever, I just want them to be kind to everybody and be inclusive. So I think I would like to think that I would still have all of those, you know, pieces of wisdom that I would like to pass on, but I think my attack and the things that I went through definitely heighten that, and just making sure that that those qualities are embedded in them from very young. Now, granted, they're 5 and 2.
Yeah.
So I do believe in starting young and inclusivity and being nice and you know, just starting that those talks now. But you know, I have also gotten the question, what are you going to do when your boys realize that, you know, they know that I wrote this book, but they have no idea what it's about? And, you know, I don't always know how to answer that question, because I think there's the parent part of you that wants to like shield your babies from everything. But then there's the realist that wants to show them that, yeah, the world it can be gross and it can be awful, but what can you do with that to, you know, leave your impact in the world? And so I think I'd say something along those lines when they actually realize what this book is about and like what mom went through and that sort of thing.
I'm sure it'll be the perfect time for them.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And with your life, I'm sure that it will be grace that comes over for both of them and for all of you as a family. And your wonderful husband that I know you have.
Yes, he is.
So that's a bonus too. So
Absolutely.
bonus,
Been
big bonus.
there with me basically, 6 months after I had gotten out of my previous relationship, and Danny and I had known each other for a while, and we were literally ran into each other, and I came with a whole shit ton of baggage.
Yeah.
And he just kind of went through all that with me. So, so yeah, he definitely has played such a huge role in being my support and being my cheerleader and just, you know, keeping my momentum going, even talking myself out of the book. He was right there to tell me to do it. So yeah,
I love that.
he's great. Yeah.
All right, in the spirit of time, I have 2 more questions. I'm dying to ask. Okay, so through all of this and what we are in today as a society, and we're in COVID, and I know I'm looking at the numbers of, you know, the abuse going up, the attacks, all the stuff that's going on at home. What in our community for survivors and during COVID, I mean, as many people, they're not safe in quarantine. So like we have Bloom Here, right? We're trying to get the word out. Where do you, I know that you are involved with Interact, which, ooh, yay, Interact. We love you. But is there anywhere else that you have in mind that you could share with us? Or, and let me wrap this into one, when this is happening, and then also what are for women or men, some of the things that we can, our self-care, right? So like, what can we do to, when things are imploding in our homes, because they are, and I'd be amiss to say that they're not happening in everyone's home. And it might be on just a different level that it's happening, but what are things de-escalating that we could do, right? And maybe what are some of your self-cares? This is a long question. So de-escalating, self-care, and then as you know, where could people go?
Sure. So speaking to survivors directly, it is awful just thinking about just domestic violence and sexual assault survivors being quarantined in homes with their abusers. And the reality of that is that, yes, those numbers are skyrocketing. And, you know, Interact is a great resource within Wake County. They have rape crisis lines. They have just crisis lines in general. They still have their shelter in place that has become, they have worked through COVID in as safe a way as possible. But on an even broader note, you know, I obviously am only one person and I don't have a big organization backing me, but on my website, I have a contact option where you can send me an email. And that has been such a wonderful way for me to connect with people anonymously, survivors, or just other organizations. And from a de-escalating standpoint, I think not necessarily from a trauma situation, but just from a anything perspective during this time. Now I will be honest, my self-care is not at an all-time high right now because I have a decently full house. My husband's out working from home. My kids are with me pretty much all the time.
Do you still like them?
I didn't today.
Yeah.
I was telling my girlfriend Mary on the way over here. But just honestly, little things, going for a walk by myself, listening to podcasts. Writing for me has kind of gone in ebbs and flows where it has overwhelmed me, but then it has also been really good for me and helpful for me. But I think however, I think especially during this time, it's almost like you have to kind of get creative, and things that may not have worked for you from a self-care perspective before all of this may work now, like a walk. And it's just this wild time that I don't think anyone would have ever thought that we would be where we are. But I think just trying to kind of get back to like the basics in your life, looking at the things that you have and the things that you're grateful for. And then if you need help, like absolutely asking for it, because there are people out there that are there to help you, myself included, you included.
Absolutely.
Okay. Did I get?
You got it all. All three. You did really well.
Okay.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Rachel.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's, I think we can all agree that we're all sitting in this room, and you Zoomies out there that are with us, Zoomies and Bloomies. I appreciate you sharing your story, because I think, as you and I both know, as survivors, the more you share, the more that people are going to come to us, right? And the more that we are able to help.
Yeah.
And that's really what we want to do in this world, right?
Absolutely.
And get everything. But if you haven't read this book, I feel like I'm really Oprah. You need to read this book. I'm like really on my Oprah kick right now. But this book is really great. Beads. And just thank you for supporting Bloom Here. And thank you for sharing your journey for you. And we're so thankful that you're still here with us. And then on a personal note, I'm gonna thank your mother again. Love you, Jean. Yeah, love you, Mom. And I'm just, oh, yay! And then thank you, all our friends that joined us, and everybody here. We have a family here actually tonight, which is really great for me as well. And thank you for this microphone. Thank you, Henry.
The microphone.